Lynn, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. How are you doing?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on.
Well, I love that I can see your book. I mean, it's literally on my nightstand in my room. And I love that I'm looking at the inner clock right here. We are going to be literally talking about the inner clock. That's what we're doing today. But before we get into that, and we already have had like a lifetime of a conversation about what we're going to be talking about today before this. But I'd love for you to share, kind of what was that defining moment for you where you were like, I not only want to embody this in my own body, but also I want to unlock this key to what I consider to be like ultimate cellular energy for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the origin of this book
Yeah.
really goes back to my childhood. As we were speaking earlier, I grew up in Seattle, and daylight is it comes in scant supply for much of the year. Surrounded by natural beauty, grew an early appreciation for that, but probably even more than that, grew an appreciation for sunlight. And in high school, I remember like I would show up at school before the sun would rise for much of the year. I would leave after basketball practice and it would already be dark. I struggled to sleep. My mood fluctuated across the year. It was really without my knowing it, I was suffering the effects of circadian disruption for much of the year. And then I remember going to Minnesota for college, which everybody thought was a very odd decision. It's bitterly cold there, but the winters, I don't know if you've been there before, but they're bright. You've got like blue sky, you've got snow on the ground that's reflecting light, and my mood was just lifted. I remember being, more consistently happy across the year. Calculus started to click. um, and then, but things didn't really click for me as far as anything to do with circadian rhythms until just a few years ago. I had moved back to Seattle, and kind of on a whim, I took up this PR invite to tour the Seattle Mariners locker room. Well, the field, but the locker room in particular. They had just installed these new LED lights that you could adjust in intensity and color. And those of us on the tour were told that they had put these in to help support the players' circadian rhythms and to energize them before the games and to relax them after so they could sleep. And finally things were starting to click for me. Could my circadian clocks explain, like my lifelong struggles? And could I fix mine too?
Yeah, no, I mean that's the $1 million question, right?
Right,
It's
right.
figuring out. So fascinating that they had these in the locker rooms as
Yeah.
well. Because when I think about circadian rhythm optimization, I think about like, I mean, obviously we're talking about Seattle, so it's not like you
Yeah.
can just go outside and be out in it. But I think a lot about being in nature and getting outside in the beginning of the day and throughout the day. And then you're really setting the tone for the evening as well. And so I don't think about these types of devices. I mean, I know red light therapy is used, and I know we're going to get into all of that, but I think that that is so fascinating that especially in places where sunshine isn't as available, like it's elusive, kind of like Seattle, it can be, that there's all these other ways that we can kind of recreate that.
Yeah, more and more there's technology coming through to help us compensate for what we might be lacking. But a key point here, though, I
Mhm.
should emphasize is that even on a cloudy day, like even in
So,
Seattle, when the clouds are overhead, it may not look that bright out there, but it's still so much brighter than it is indoors.
yes.
Artificial light just does not compare to what nature provides us. So I just, yeah, want to caution that still getting outside on a cloudy day is a really good idea, and it makes your clocks happy.
I have a couple of questions around this. I know I want to go
Yeah.
more into the research of the book and all that, but just because we're here and you mentioned that, from what I've read in the other books I've read and talking to other circadian rhythm experts, it's is within the hour get outside. The sooner the better. If it's sunny, even 5 minutes, be out there. No, get direct sunlight. No sunglasses. But if it's, because I'm a block away from the beach, so there's marine layer. Where there's a lot of
Oh, yeah.
overcast mornings, which I honestly I love. I love that beach energy. It's what you get. Like I'm here for all the coastal experience. And on days like that, then what I've read is that it's recommended to be out there about 10 to 15 minutes. So just spend more time drinking your matcha or your coffee or your tea energy in the morning. And then in ideally, another piece of that is then also grounding at the same time if you can as well, or moving outside. So is this kind of true? Is this right ish?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's just so many layers of
For
benefits to
sure.
being outside, right? I mean, that's how our ancestors evolved. That's where we come from. And because of that, our bodies evolved to, need that and look for that. So, yeah, from the scientists I've spoken with, there's no exact recipe, right? And for every person, it's different. But getting outside within a couple hours after you get up in the morning is the prime time. Yeah, as long as you can be out there and soaking up those photons, the better. But, if you can get out for 20 minutes and, yeah, like walk to get your coffee and just catch your breath. And it's a great way to start the day. And it's a great way for your circadian clocks to get in sync. And that sets you up for a healthier rhythm throughout the day. And it also sets you up for easier sleep that night. You're going to get tired at, quote unquote, the right time a lot easier if you get that early morning light.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I knew that there wasn't a hard and fast rule. I mean, I think get in where you fit in. But I definitely, my intention, kind of how I do it is once I get my son off to childcare, and my son goes to he goes to a Scandinavian forest school. So he spends
Ooh,
4 hours
nice.
a day outside almost every day in nature. Like that's what they're doing, becoming a naturalist, I guess, which is
Oh, that's
great.
excellent. Yes.
We drop him off, and either we'll take a walk, like he's at this lagoon, and so we can hike there, or we get home and we walk after. So usually within 2 hours, if we can't get outside right out the gate because we're chasing a 3-year-old around the house, then we'll immediately, once we drop him off, then we're in it. And so I love that we have a kind of a bigger window, because I know I've read from some experts that they're like, okay, within that hour, and I'm just like, oh, it's hard as a kind of a mom to a younger child to get out the door on the earlier side.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, again, within your limits, no hard and fast rule. Earlier the better. And then even if you can't get out in the morning, just throughout the day, just stock up on photons as much as you can before the evening hours when we're supposed to turn those lights down.
Yes, and we're going to get into that too as well.
Mhm.
So, Lynn, I know that you really you were an N of one research participant. Like you went through it. You wore light sensors. You spit into test tubes. You slept in a Cold War era bunker. I mean, you wore all the wearables. Talk to me about that experience. Like, what did that experience allow you to gain, like perspective regarding your internal clock, especially because you felt like it was a big part of why you had some challenges growing up?
Yeah. Yeah. The research for this book, it took me, as you hinted at, 50 feet underground in Arkansas, where for 10 days I lived timeless, no clocks, no daylight, no other humans around. So I really cut myself off. And I wore all the wearables, including, a glucose monitor, temperature sensors. And then I went to the northern reaches of Alaska during the summer solstice, where it never quite got dark, sent hair to Germany to test for my rhythms, but into test tubes, like you said. So through it all, I realized that my clocks really do easily fall out of sync. And this was to be expected, as scientists warned me would happen. And it really felt like, an extreme case of jet lag, which probably most of us have experienced. And that is your clocks falling out of sync from each other and from the natural rhythms. And I had the data to show me, but I felt it. I had that grumbly stomach. I was tired at odd times of day. My mood was just all out of whack. That's just evidence of these inner clocks not being in tune. So I really gained a deep respect for my rhythms, and I vowed to improve my circadian hygiene, which has been a lifelong struggle for me too. I mean, I spoke about my childhood, but even as an adult, my profession I chose is ultimately, this is my second career, but ultimately I chose to be a journalist and a freelance journalist, which means, my time is super flexible. I can eat at any hours, I can sleep at any hours, which has its perks, but also makes it hard to be consistent. And that's another thing I learned is consistency is key. The times we eat, when we go to bed, trying to keep those consistent 7 days a week is really important for our circadian health.
Yeah, I would love to talk a little bit about consistency and what are some of the hard and fast rules around consistency? Because I think that's where a lot of us struggle. We can get it right some of the time. In today's age, I feel like there's more flexibility, or we can work longer hours more than we ever have. It's not like people just have 9 to 5s anymore. And then, we're talking to a lot of like, if we're talking about this podcast, lots of moms and women holding down the fort. At 7:45, I'm usually chasing a naked 3-year-old around the house. You know what I'm saying? So, and mind you, we have a locked and loaded sleep routine for him for sure. And so I understand, I get the importance of consistency, especially from an early age, as I'm the one making sure that that happens for my child. But it's a whole nother thing to do it as an adult with so many distractions and so many other things that we could consider more important.
Right. It's hard. I mean, it's all about balance, right? And yeah, I think, with the COVID pandemic, one of the, it's hard to find positives out of it, but one thing that I think has come out of it is employers and employees are realizing that flexibility is doable, it's sustainable. People still get their work done if they, work at times that work best for them. Being able to work from home has made that easier because our bodies all tick on their own time. There's some of us are early birds, some of us are night owls. And when we can get up without an alarm clock, that is key. And that helps consistency. Because if we're forced to get up at 6 a.m. 5 days a week for work and our work, night owls, and our body is not ready to get up at that hour, yeah, we're going to sleep in on the weekends. Like, of course, it's really, really hard to keep consistent 7 days a week. So I think, anyway, COVID has opened up more of this possibility of a more flexible, circadian friendly schedule for all of us. And if we can kind of roll with that momentum and grow it, if we can collectively decide that, yeah, like flexible work times work. And along with that, school hours. So high schools and middle schools have traditionally, at least in the last decades, started really early. And adolescent kids are not programmed to rise at that early hour. So, our circadian rhythms face challenges from a very early age. And that's making, consistency difficult from the get-go.
Yeah, I agree. I forget how early school can be for some kids and just how crazy that is to get kids up when they're not even ready to be up.
Right.
We never wake up my son ever. No. He's always waking up on his own accord, and we make sure we get him to bed early enough, right? And then I
Yeah.
myself, same thing. Once he's in bed, I honestly have just a half hour between when he's asleep and when as I like to be very positive, I get to be in bed. Not that I have to be in bed, but I get to be in
Uh-huh.
bed. And I have
Okay.
all these little rituals that I do to really gear myself up so that I'm getting enough sleep, so that I'm not needing an alarm clock either, so that I'm waking up feeling really good. Like I know how critical that is. And would you walk us through? Because I think what is a really easy thing for me to do is get outside and get sunshine. I find that that's
Yeah.
super easy. It's the evening routine that I have to really be disciplined and consistent because my husband's a night owl. I'm more early, and he'll want to watch something and do something, and I'm like, nope. I'm in my routine. I tell people, treat your sleep routine like it's $1 million meeting. Like, don't let anyone touch it. So once I start the supplements, it's game. Like, don't come to me with a work question. Don't try to convince me to watch a show with you. Like it's game over in terms of I'm full on the path of sleep. But it is a more of a discipline for me at night than it is for me in the morning. And so do you have what are some of the things you've learned in terms of kind of preparing for sleep? So that we can really fall asleep easier and consistently stay asleep at night.
Yeah, I mean, again, it starts in the morning,
Yeah, oh,
as
for
we
sure.
talked about that light. I mean, so when people ask me, and they do when they hear that I'm writing a
Absolutely.
book on circadian rhythms, what can I do? And there's really three main things that I'm recommending. And, I call these, 3 core clock rules. But the first one is contrast, which we've been talking about. And that's really to make your days bright and your nights dark. So really have that contrast between your day and night. And that's, the getting outside in the morning, it's getting as many doses of daylight throughout the day as you possibly can. And if you are, stuck in a cubicle far from a window, then you probably need to supplement your natural light with artificial light, and really trying to get those lights to be bright and rich in blue wavelengths, which mimics what the sun does. And then at night, dim your lights. So as you're asking for your sleep routine, hours before bed, try to dim your lights. I use it's kind of silly, but I have this kind of fleet of faux candles I've spread around my apartment, and I have a little remote that I can click on, and so I have all these glowing candles. It's really cozy. I really like it. But things like that to just try to, it calms you down, and it also calms, I mean, it tells your circadian clocks that it's nighttime. We're getting close to bedtime. And then the second rule is constrict. So that's about our consumption of food, and that includes caloric drinks. So it's not just what we eat, but when we eat that really matters. So trying to consolidate your eating to a relatively short window and not eating close to bed. So if you can stop eating 3 hours before you go to bed, that also tells the body that it is approaching bedtime, and it'll keep the physiological processes that are supposed to be during daytime consolidated to daytime, and that will help you sleep. And we can talk more about that later. And then third is consistency, which we've been talking about. So eat, exercise, sleep at the same hours every day. So if you're doing that, then your body is going to be more primed to want to go to sleep at that same hour that night. It's programmed. And so I think kind of between those three things, and there's a lot of little tweaks we can do in our lives for each of those to try to boost them. But creating that contrast, constricting your meal times, and being consistent, I think, are really the keys.
I love that. Yeah, I would love to. I love the 3-hour rule before bed.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I mean,
it's hard. It's hard. Like girls' nights, I'm hanging out. I'm like, of course I want to sip some wine and snacks. So, again, not hard and fast. I give myself some outs and some days off, but in general, that's
Lynn, in your research, did you get a chance to look at alcohol and circadian rhythm and kind of what you saw there? For me, it's off the table. Morning me is always regretful of anything, any alcohol. I haven't had a drink in, I think, almost over a year, but I remember towards the end, especially as I was entering my late 30s and 40s, maybe it was early 40s, I would even have a glass of wine. The next day, my body's like, why did you? And I just like, and I felt like I went to sleep okay, but the next day I just didn't feel great. So I had a feeling that it was messing with my circadian rhythm to some degree.
Your hunch is correct. Similar for me. I mean, I still bend my rules, and I still allow myself to, to have a little wine here and there with girlfriends, but it is less and less, because I really have realized that, it might calm you down, might help you fall asleep faster, but the quality of your sleep is really tanked. I wear this Fitbit, just one of the many things I wore while I was in the bunker, but I've stuck with this one. And I see that pattern. If I drink, especially if it is close to bedtime, then my heart rate is going to be higher throughout the night. My REM sleep, the minutes are going to be a lot lower. And that's, across the board, any time I drink. If I drink earlier in the day, which is I don't know, I'm tired afterwards, so I'm not really motivated to want to do that either. But then it seems to be okay. Your body's processed it, metabolize it, process it. It doesn't affect sleep as much. But
I do tell my audience, if you're gonna drink early, drink
yes.
earlier. I mean, just so your body actually metabolizes it, so it doesn't go into your, mess with your sleep. I hear that.
Exactly.
Also, in the research, I was curious, and that was very much the research that I had read as well. And that was that was my very much consistent personal experience every time. And every time I would wake up, and again, it would be like once a quarter, and I was like, man, that wasn't worth it. That just wasn't worth it. Nope. To a point where I was just like, it's just not worth it ever anymore. And maybe everyone gets to that age or that moment in time where they're just like, no, thanks. It gets there. I know that in one of the things you've been really clear with is that consistency. And particularly, I want to make it clear to everybody, she is saying consistent nighttime bedtime. Like it's not 10 o'clock one night, 12 o'clock the next night, 9 o'clock the next night. Like it is it doesn't matter if it's a Friday or a Tuesday or a Sunday, 7 days a week, you are consistent. And is there, was, I know that there's night owls versus not, versus people that love to get up, early birds. But in the research, did you find that there is a sweet spot for when lights should be off, like shut it down?
I mean, on average,
Mhm.
I mean, I think, well, it's hard even to say average. I mean, we really do vary a lot. But the research on the whole, looking at the average, say American, going to bed on the earlier side is just healthier. There's some evidence that suggests night owls are less healthy overall, and it's hard to, exactly pinpoint the chicken or egg for a lot of these things. But earlier is better, and then starting to shut things down, back up 2-3 hours from your bedtime, which hopefully is somewhat consistent 7 days a week. Then you want to, yeah, you want to be dimming the lights. You want to especially you start trying to cut out a lot of those blue wavelengths. You want to stop eating, you want to stop taking in any alcohol, and and that really should help prime your clocks to again be transitioning those physiological processes that they control to be ready for the night routine, which is, and that's metabolism, all these things that fluctuate throughout the day are tied into that. And maybe we can talk more about that too, but the metabolism piece is really, really key. If you want to be processing, keeping your glucose levels low, you want to be burning fat, you want to be, um, waking up the next day more refreshed. That is really, really key to keep those in tune.
Yeah, when you were looking at your continuous glucose monitor and kind of measuring some of these things, I'm guessing you were, with your saliva testing. I don't know if it was looking at just cortisol, diurnal levels, or if you're looking at other hormones. But I'd love to connect to the metabolic piece. I think this is such an important part of it. When I think
Right.
about circadian rhythm optimization, I think a lot about metabolic health and how closely tied they are together. Any big principles around that besides obviously keeping our blood sugar optimized and balanced?
Yeah, well, it really comes down to thinking again. So the enzymes, our digestive enzymes, our hormones, these things are fluctuating throughout the day. Even like our production of saliva. So all these things that have to do with our digestive system and our metabolism of food are going to be changing throughout the day. So pancreas is secreting less insulin at night. So naturally, our body's gonna have a harder time breaking down that glucose. So we're gonna have higher blood sugar spikes. Our our core body temperature drops at night, and if we eat close to bed, then that's bringing all this blood to the gut and it's raising core body temperature, which makes it harder to sleep. Uh, our ghrelin, so that's the hunger hormone, that also fluctuates throughout the day, as does leptin, the appetite suppressing hormone. So that should be rising at night. The ghrelin should be rising in the morning. Let's see. There's so many, all these things when we are consistent and when our circadian clocks are in sync, these things know when they're doing these things and they follow that rhythm. But when we throw things off, then we're having ghrelin spiking at night. We're having our all these hormones that we count on not following the rhythm that would be, optimal for our health. So if you think about it, our ancestors, they likely ate in compressed periods between sunrise and sunset. They weren't probably getting up and looking for a midnight snack, right? And this is how we evolved. So again, the eating late is probably the biggest problem, but it's also, thinking about it across the whole 24-hour day. And it's this one piece, this is really was fascinating to me when I first came across it. But not only this is kind of negative thinking, right? Don't do these things, but also time restricted eating is this new concept that's coming into play more and more. And there's some fascinating research going back more than a decade now that if we can consolidate those hours, and kind of a sweet spot researchers are pointing to is maybe 10 hours during the day, that we can really help stave off metabolic disease.
Mhm. Yeah, it's my favorite. I'm a
Yeah.
big proponent of early time restricted eating. that's kind of how I build out my plans for women I work with, in terms of creating metabolically healthy resilience. Is like we typically, my family, we're done eating by 6 or 6:30.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so we're I've worn a glucose monitor enough to know that what I eat at 6 o'clock, my blood glucose looks very different even at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And so
Yeah.
and just giving our bodies a little opportunity. Plus, my son goes to bed earlier than us. I want to give him that 3 hour window too. And so I probably have like a 4.5 hour window, but then we roll it all the way to breakfast the next day. So now I can't speak for
Yeah.
my husband. I don't know what he's doing at night, but like I know that my son and I, we eat by 6:30, and then we have breakfast in the morning, probably like 7:45 or 8 or something like that. And
Yeah.
so, but I've been tracking blood sugar for a long time, and obviously his little energy levels, which at 3 is very different than me at almost 45. But I've looked at supporting women. I know that intermittent fasting, a lot of that, it can be hard. And I think,
Mhm.
what makes this easier, and where is the juice worth the squeeze? And to me, this window, this kind of window, this early time restricted eating made the most sense around not only supporting our circadian rhythm, but ultimately our metabolic health and our blood sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's the old saying, eat, let's see, eat like a king in the
Yes,
morning,
a king in the, yeah,
uh,
queen at
queen
lunch
at lunch,
and a pauper
pauper
at
at
dinner.
dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really, yeah, I think the science backs that up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The other question I was curious about, was around eating, because we're in the summer right now, when we're recording this, and it's a little bit later. So the sun's still out until 8 o'clock, versus obviously winter time, December, January, where the sun is down by like 5:30. Um, Curious, how important is it to align with that? Because I find that we still eat on the earlier side, even though the sun is out longer. How much adjustment should we be making for this?
There wasn't any clear-cut
Okay.
answers to that in the literature. I think if we step back and think about evolution, we evolved at the equator. You're further south than I am, so it's it's probably a little more natural and healthier where you're at with having the extreme day length changes across the year. I think, we have adapted to that to some extent, and I think we naturally, like in the winter, sleep a little longer than in the summer, and I think the rest of our patterns or rhythms kind of follow suit. But kind of the big takeaway is try to be as consistent as possible across the
Okay.
year. But yeah, like maybe a little fluctuation is just fine. But I think that research is still needs to be borne out.
Okay, cool. I was just curious. I would say that we're where I've kind of landed is that we're still just consistent. Like dinner's at 5:30 or 6,
Yes,
you
I
know.
I can't hurt.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great.
I'd love to also talk. I know that you talk to a lot of scientists and a lot of researchers in this topic, and kind of what were some of the biggest, like maybe the strangest or the biggest aha moments, things that you were like, oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, so many fascinating things. Well, one thing that really struck me, because I would have never thought about it, and I am not a mother myself, so maybe this occurred to you, and especially given your profession, maybe you know this, but the ingredients of a mother's milk vary greatly across the day. Breast milk at 8 a.m., very different than breast milk at 8 p.m. And this goes back to some of the stuff we've been talking about. Hormones, all these things in our body are constantly changing. So, morning milk naturally contains more cortisol as well as amino acids that promote activity. And then night milk will naturally contain more sleep promoting melatonin and tryptophan. So, the implications here is, if a mom's feeding her baby, um, then she's sharing these timely hormones that's helping the baby's rhythms. But if she's pumping that milk and bottle feeding it to the baby later, mom or dad are bottle feeding, and if those that milk gets mixed up, if they're feeding the baby morning milk at night before the baby's going to bed, that could really mess things up. It could make it a lot harder for that baby to sleep, and
Mhm.
and in so doing, make it harder for the parents to sleep too. So I thought that was really fascinating, and it's a relatively easy fix. Labeling bottles of breast milk,
Mhm.
AM and PM milk.
Mhm. Yeah. I definitely wasn't doing that. I mean, I was
Yeah.
also, it was a yes, and I was breastfeeding a lot. And
Yeah.
when I was in interviews, or I was, things like this, I was definitely, there was bottles and they were nannies and things like that. And so,
Right.
but
I
I
mean,
was
there's so
probably
many things to
breastfeeding
think
him
about.
all in the evening. Like I definitely probably didn't bottle a lot of that, but yeah, it just,
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Right.
And I'm past the phase now, but yeah, it's like definitely a consideration. So yeah, I guess that totally makes so much sense.
Right. And it's funny too, even I think it was since I finished the book, but I hadn't thought about cow milk too. I mean, it's the same for cows.
Mm,
So they're
it's a
pumping
mixed
milk
bag.
to feed us from the grocery store. And yeah, there's actually one, I think it's in Ireland. This one dairy is promoting sleepy milk, I think they call it, where they just pump it at night and it's
Oh
gonna
my
have more
God.
melatonin. So yeah.
I would love to steer the conversation, and if there's other aha moments, by all means. But steer
Mhm.
the conversation between. I think when I think about obviously circadian rhythm, there's a lot of hormones, like you mentioned, ghrelin and leptin and insulin, and digestive enzymes. There's a lot being coordinated. I know estradiol and progesterone are also being coordinated. But when I think about the two major hormones on the docket, it's going to be cortisol and melatonin. And can you talk to me about what is that interplay like, and how can I know that a lot of what we've been talking about already really has been around like how can we honor these hormones, particularly melatonin? Like how do we gear melatonin up to rise when it's supposed to by winding down, like having the candlelight or dimming lights? But talk to me a little bit about, have you found in the research where we see that cortisol disruption? Because I see a lot of that where my women are having a hard time going to sleep, the mental chatter. I look at cortisol diurnal curves all the time. Often it's deregulated where we don't see a big cortisol awakening response, but then we see it's like a flipped curve, right? We see it very high at night before bed. Did you get a chance to look into that research? Obviously, I didn't get to that part of the book, but anything we should be mindful around that as well.
Yeah, I didn't get into too many specifics on cortisol other than the fact that, again, yeah, cortisol, melatonin, all these things do have a daily rhythm, and trying to keep all your circadian clocks in check, having good circadian hygiene should help those rise and fall at optimal times. That said, I mean, we mentioned, since we're talking about melatonin too, I can say that there's a lot more research looking at that in terms of melatonin supplementation, which has
Mhm.
become hugely popular even for children, which can get a little frightening because there's potential implications there and health concerns. But one thing that I wasn't aware of that I learned pretty recently is that, because I on occasion I'll take melatonin, especially if I'm traveling or struggling to sleep. I'd pop a pill before bed, but it's actually can be counterproductive if you
Mhm.
take melatonin right before you go to bed, because you want to take it when your body is naturally starting to ramp up melatonin production, which is, again, that sweet spot of 2-3 hours before bed is when the body's starting to pump it out a little bit more, and that's when you want to take it. If you take it closer to bed, it can actually make it harder to fall asleep and like push your rhythms later, which makes the next night harder to fall asleep too. So, and also it's the dose. Like, you really don't want to take very much of it if you want to avoid the groggy after effects the next morning. Just a small dose, less than is it milligrams? Because I know that, yeah, I think it's
Usually
like
it's done in 1, 3, 5, 10.
yes.
Yeah.
So it's like below 1 milligram is plenty. One scientist I spoke to recommended this dropper formula, like a baby dropper formula, and just having like a couple drops of that, which was like, I don't know if it was half a milligram, but a small amount, 2-3 hours before bed. So, but not that you need to do that all the time either, but like as needed, if that helps kind of get your clocks back in sync and helps you to sleep. So again, just trying to keep good circadian hygiene across the board should help with the melatonin, cortisol, but there's a lot of factors going into play here, including estrogen levels and all these things, right? That's going to affect cortisol too,
Yeah. Oh no.
but
Yeah, I
and vice
agree.
versa.
But good to know. I mean, a lot of, it's again, droppers, you can dose it out a little bit differently, but like
Right.
in supplements already, so often, a milligram is where it starts. And so it's so good to hear
Right.
that. And then I think I think my big takeaway here is if you are going to dose it even earlier than you think. So
Yes.
even I was just dosing it an hour before bed. I'm probably taking like a milligram to 3. But yeah, that's a good consideration because I know that it's rising 3 hours or so before bedtime and maybe even I always think about melatonin starting to kind of kick up around 5 or 6, like starting to really barely rise as cortisol's dropping, it's kind of coming up and then starts to really, at 8, 9 o'clock, and then peaking, in the middle of the night. So,
Right.
okay,
Yep.
good to know. Yeah, I mean, this is, when I'm working with women who are struggling with sleep issues, not only is it difficult falling asleep because again, I a lot of just excess cortisol is in the system and then habits that we're not consistent enough. We probably don't have enough melatonin to get asleep. But then we're not, we don't get that early sunshine too. And so that's why I love the idea of, if we can get our clocks aligned. I mean, there's obviously other ways that we can augment sleep as well, but these are some of I think the tried and true. I know that when I'm consistent with a lot of these lifestyle habits of optimizing my circadian rhythm, it makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. And then you were hinting at it here. It's like there's like the two feedback loops, right? There's the negative and the positive. And it's can be easy to go into that vicious cycle of, yeah, staying up too late, missing the morning light, which makes you stay up later the next night. And your whole body gets out of whack. Versus consistency, morning light, it's like easier to keep with it because your body's ready for it. And you can have kind of that, positive feedback playing out.
Yeah, I think every morning when I'm thinking about getting outside in sunshine, I'm literally thinking this is what's going to kickstart. This is kickstarting my nighttime routine.
Yes.
And if I can
Yes.
do this in the morning, that I know that I've already done, like I'm half, I wouldn't call it half the battle, but like I have already taken one of the biggest steps I can take to getting deep restful sleep tonight. And I'm feeling more confident that I'm going to follow through on the back end as well. I'm like, okay, I've already done this other big piece. I stopped dinner by, 6:30. Like there's these pieces in place. So it feels a lot more manageable as we're breaking these things up during the day. It's kind of like, putting money in a bank account, throughout the day. It's just like,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that you've got some wiggle room too, Lynn, but I would love for you to what is like a day in the life for you, with your flexible schedule and living in Seattle, and knowing that circadian rhythm deregulation was probably very much a play for you in terms of how you felt. How does it look for you at this point? Is it very second nature on the day to day?
It's a constantly excuse me, constantly evolving challenge. I think I'm getting better and better. But yeah, my morning routine. So I really try to not use an alarm clock. I really try, right now I'm kind of waking up naturally between 7, 7:30. It's easier in the summer. I mean, even with my blackout curtains, I've actually and I've also taped some like garbage bags around the outside to try to keep the light from sneaking in because there's a couple months where it's way too early, that light sneaking in. I don't need to get up yet. So anyway, so I'm very conscious about, yeah, blocking out the light when I don't want it, getting up, getting immediate exposure to light. So I am, I'm really fortunate where I live. You can see this,
I
but I
can
have a
see. I've been watching runners and walkers out of your window this whole
yeah.
time.
So yeah,
I
I've
was
got
like,
this.
look at everyone's outside.
I know, it's so motivating.
It looks like
I've
you're
got this.
next to a park or something. It looks very
Yes,
lovely.
yes, Green Lake Park is right out there. So yeah, I've got this great picture window. So, and I've situated my desk,
Yeah, look at
close to
there.
it. And one interesting thing I learned in writing the book, I was playing around with a, a light detector, a couple different ones, but just the slightest shifts in where you are relative to a window can make a huge difference. So I actually I pulled my desk out a little bit so I have a little more window kind of in front of my eyes, if that
Mm-hmm,
makes sense.
mm-hmm.
So some more of those photons can get to my eyes, and being as close as possible to a window, like it's kind of exponential as you step away from the window, how much less light your eyes are getting. And it's just, it's really critical to get that light. So in the morning, light first thing. I try to take a little walk out across the park to a coffee shop. So I get my little 20-minute dose of actual daylight. And, across the year, any time of year, I have a little patio too. And I try to go sit out there with my work, I'll print off something that I need to go over and I'll sit out there and bundle up if necessary, just to be outside throughout the day as well. And then at night, yeah, I turn off all the bright lights and I click on my candles. You
I
can see
love
a few
it.
of them
Yeah, I
here.
can see a few. That's so cozy.
It is very cozy and yeah, it's a little harder with a less regimented work schedule, but I've been, trying very consciously to eat, have breakfast around 9, lunch around 1. I try to have earlier dinners now between 5 and 6 if I don't, have other plans like a date or something, which I try to steer earlier.
You're just like, this is how we do it
This is
today. I
yeah,
mean, all of my
exactly.
friends, we all eat at 6 or 5:30. So I have
Uh-huh.
we do blood sugar friendly mocktails. It's everyone, it's nice. It's nice when you have friends who all want to optimize their circadian clock.
Oh, good for you. I'm still trying to convince my friends to get on board with me, but it's in process. It is happy hour too, right? So like happy hour food deals. It's
Oh
if
my
you want to go
gosh,
out,
there's
it's
nothing
cheaper.
good about that. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
I hear that. Okay, and so then so eating
yeah.
try to align to eating dinner with on the early
Mhm.
trying to convince all your friends to eat dinner
Yes.
on the earlier
Got
side,
it.
put a CGM on and then they'll see.
Exactly.
That's it. You're like, everyone's getting a continuous glucose monitor for Christmas.
Yes, the data will tell you.
The
You'll
data will
believe
tell you.
me.
It won't lie.
No.
And then I know the lights go off. It's much more
Mhm.
dim. It's relaxed. Do you read a book? Do you take any other supplement? Do you take magnesium before bed, or you're feeling pretty good, kind of just with the lifestyle habits?
Yeah, and I actually do take magnesium before
Mhm.
bed for a few reasons. So, I mean, yeah, that probably doesn't hurt either.
Mhm.
But I think I didn't get into any of that in the book, so I really can't
Okay.
comment too much on that. But yeah, I usually I'll do some reading. I mean, sometimes I'll watch a show. I mean, it's like, screen time, you're supposed to do less of it, but I actually did some measurements and the TV from my distance, it's not sending a ton of blue light into my eyes.
Interesting.
And as some scientists pointed out to me, again, it's a balance.
Yeah.
And it's also about the content, like what's, gonna raise your blood pressure and get you
Oh.
excited. Like maybe avoid those
Ooh.
things at night.
Those
A
romantic
cute kitty.
fantasies I read. Oh goodness.
Oh no, oh no. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, good to know. Yeah, we're I swear harsh lighting, bright lights at
Mm,
night.
hmm.
Like where I'll go visit a family's house or a hotel room and I'm just like, "Oh my God." I feel like
Yes.
we're a vampire family. We're just so we actually travel with night lights everywhere we go.
Oh
Especially
my
for my
gosh, love
son.
it.
And my
Yeah.
son's room is completely blacked out, dark, and we just have a night light for reading and
Mhm.
then lights off. Like that's it. And
Yeah.
so no night lights at all. We have tape over all we have an air doctor in his room and that's taped over so you can't see the color because a lot of these things have blue lighting or
Yes.
green, bright
Oh,
green lights. Ugh.
yes.
So
So
yeah,
annoying.
but I think one of the best things we did is we have light dimmers on all of our lamps, except for my son's room only has that little night light. That's it. So he doesn't even have an actual lamp because that's just not a good idea for a 3-year-old. I just don't, it's like a little teeny egg lamp. But the rest of our rooms, even our living room, like after dinner, everything dims. The bath, like for bath time play, again,
Mhm.
those are dim lights in the bathroom too. So that's once it gets to be, I think like 7 o'clock, everything just dims out. Like it's almost automatic,
Well
which is
done.
nice.
Well done.
Yeah.
I don't need to do a circadian audit of your house. You've got it under control.
But I
Just
love the idea of candles. We should definitely do more of that versus our little light dimmers.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, I love
But
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I've got the actually a recent purchase because I was carrying like a candle into the bathroom at night and that was just a bit much. So now I have one of those little night lights that you can dim that I have in my
Nice.
bathroom. So for the midnight trips into there, you don't have to blast the
Exactly. There's
lights.
nothing worse than, and you have to get up to go to the bathroom before bed and you've already done all your things. And then you got to turn off this ridiculous light in the bathroom to
Right.
see. Like,
Right.
I just feel like it just jars the system. And so these little things, they make all the difference. And a lot of things you just like, you set it and forget it. You do it once and it's done,
Yes.
you know,
Absolutely.
which I
Yeah.
love.
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I've got my dad and friends are probably a little annoyed with me because I go over to their houses at night and I'm like, it's too bright. And I have blue light blocking glasses that sometimes I'll bring out just to be obnoxious and put them on and be like, look, you can't shine
Good
these
for
lights.
you. Good for you. It's true though. It's so intense.
Yeah,
I feel like your nervous system is trying to recalibrate. It's offensive. That kind of light. It can be, especially if you already are so dialed to dim lighting at night. That kind of light is just offensive. You're just like, how do people function in this after a certain time? Like, I get if you're
exactly.
much, much older and you don't want to trip and fall. Okay, I get that, but while we're still younger, we can navigate with dim lights in the house. Okay,
Exactly.
Lynn, honey, where can we find the
Yeah.
book? I know it's available. It's going to be available all the places. Anywhere do you want us to go to get the book? And where can we go and find you?
Yes. So the book will be out September 24th, and you can go to the Penguin Random House page for The Inner Clock, or, Google The Inner Clock and my name, Lynne Peeples. And there will be links there for purchasing through any of your choice sellers. And you can also find me at lynnpeoples.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming on and sharing. I mean, I feel like you made it feel easy enough. I mean, again, consistency is the one takeaway here. But overall, I feel like we can all do this. And
Yes.
like you mentioned, it is very easy to direct how easy it is to throw our clocks off, but I think it's relatively easy to bring them back online.
Rein them back in. Yes. Yes, absolutely. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.